Section 2.3.13. The accompanying relative frequency ogive represent the composite score on a standardized test for a high school graduating class. We're going to complete parts A through D below. So we want to first determine the class width. Now again, an ogive is a graph that represents the cumulative frequency or cumulative relative frequency for the class. It is constructed by plotting points whose x-coordinates are the upper class limits and whose y-coordinates are the cumulative frequencies or cumulative relative frequencies. After the points for each class are plotted, the line segments are drawn connecting consecutive points. An additional line segment is drawn connecting the point for the first class of the horizontal axis at a location representing the upper limit of the class that would precede the first class if it existed. So this is a cumulative relative frequency, as you can see here on the left part of the graph. And this is considered the composite score down here on the horizontal axis. So note that the class width is the difference between the x-coordinates of the consecutive points on the ogive. So therefore, 6 minus 3 is 3. 9 minus 6 is 3. So therefore, we can say the class width is 3. Now for part B, it says approximately 10% of the students had a composite score below what level? So we need to determine, what does 10% represent on our graph? Does it represent the cumulative relative frequency, or does it represent the composite score? Well, 10%, if you look here, okay, corresponds to the relative frequency. So it corresponds to the y-coordinate. So we view the ogive and identify the score that corresponds to the cumulative relative frequency that's 10%. So if we take a look at that, well, 10% is the same thing as 0.1. And then what we're going to do is we're going to go all the way to where it touches the graph. And so if we go down, it gives us a composite score of 12. So approximately 10% of the students had a composite score below 12. Next question says, what percentage of students had a composite score less than 18? So again, what we want to do is we want to first determine whether 18 corresponds to the x or the y coordinate. Well, 18 is a score, so we're looking at the composite score. So looking at 18, if you draw our line all the way down, is going to give us a percent, or at 0.7. Well, that means it's 70%. So 70% of the students had a composite score of 18 or below. Now in part D, it says 20% of the students had a composite score above what level? So if 20% of the scores are above the level, then there are 100 minus 20%, which equals 80% of the scores that are below the level. So notice that 80% corresponds to the y-coordinate of a point on the ogive. So review the ogive and identify the score that corresponds to the cumulative relative frequency at 80%. Well, if we take our 80% and then scroll down here, we're going to get a score of 21. So what it's saying here is that 20% of students had a composite score that was above 21. That means that anything above here was the 20%, anything below was the 80%.